Hi, everybody. My name is Carl Darden, and I'd like to welcome and thank all of you for joining us today on Navy Sports Central. I'm your host, and this is the official podcast of the Navy Sports Nation, where we take a deeper dive into Navy sports. August is winding down in Annapolis, which means that the fall sports are just now starting to crank up. The women's soccer team already has several games in the books. The men won their home opener against VMI, and the volleyball team won 2 out of 3 matches in their first invitational of the year. And even though the football team had a very tough day, Navy still won the weekend against Notre Dame thanks to the men's rugby team. We've got all that plus our deep dive segment and question of the day, so don't go anywhere. The 2023-24 sports season is finally here. All right, welcome back to the start of what promises to be another exciting sports season at Navy. Whether this is the first time you're checking us out or you're a regular listener, thanks for taking the time. Let's go ahead and get our sports update started with the women's soccer team. The Mids won their first game of the year and followed that up with 3 hard-fought draws, one of which was against the University of Maryland. And in that game, senior goalkeeper Maddie Gallagher came up huge at the end. She turned away 2 big shots within the last couple of minutes to preserve a 3-3 draw. Over on the men's side, David Jackson's 2 penalty kicks gave the Mids a 3-0 shutout over VMI in their home opener. And they've got 2 more games at home over the Labor Day weekend against Howard and Liberty. Now let's jump indoors and see what's going on with the women's volleyball team. They competed in the University of Albany Invitational over the weekend and came out of it winning 2 out of 3 matches. Both of the wins were sweeps over Syracuse and Albany. Senior Jamie Llewellyn had 17 kills against the host team, and her sister Jordan came through with 8 more in a match where the Mids were pretty much in control the whole time. Of course, most of the attention this weekend was focused on Dublin, Ireland, where the football team opened their season against 13th-ranked Notre Dame. Now, if you saw the game, you know it wasn't anything to write home about, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time picking it apart. But the fact is, no one should have been all that surprised. Now, don't get me wrong. I think the Mids will learn from that game, put it in the rearview mirror, and go on to have a solid season. But I have to tell you that I'm not a big fan of these Navy-Notre Dame games that are played in Ireland. I don't have anything against the country. In fact, I'd love to visit it one of these days. But my problem is that the only time to schedule a game like this is at the very beginning of the year. And that means that the nationally ranked Irish had the entire preseason to prepare for a Navy offense that, in this particular case, doesn't have all the kinks worked out yet. And it showed. I do think the Mids will be able to move the ball against most teams as they get more into their schedule. But they really had no chance at all against a Notre Dame team that has designs on getting to the college football playoff. Especially since they have a quarterback who's the same age now as Patrick Mahomes was when he won his first Super Bowl. That's right. This guy, Sam Hartman, is a graduate transfer from Wake Forest who used every eligibility rule available to him because of COVID so that he could suit up as a college football player at 24 years old. He dominated the game, and I would expect him to since he's taken over 3,500 snaps as a Division I quarterback. When NBC flashed up that statistic, I just couldn't believe it. Anyway, I think the next 3 games will be a better indicator of Navy's potential this year, so they need to focus on the future. The good news is that despite the lopsided loss, the defending national champion men's rugby team pounded the Irish by a score of 78-0. The Mids scored early and often, building a 42-0 lead by halftime, and they were pretty much on cruise control the rest of the afternoon as they tacked on 36 more points. So, if you look at the weekend from a combined scoring standpoint, Navy came out on top 81-42. Maybe that's a bit over the top when it comes to positive spin, but you guys should know by now that I'm an eternal optimist when it comes to Navy sports, and that's never going to change. All right, that does it for our sports update. Stick around because our deep dive segment is next. Okay, it is time for our deep dive segment here on Navy Sports Central, and today we're going to be focusing on the newest varsity sport at the Academy, that being the women's triathlon. The triathlon has actually been a co-ed sport at Annapolis since the early 1990s, and it has been an emerging sport for women in particular on the college scene ever since. The support that has built over the last several years led to the announcement on March 1st, so you're looking at basically 6 months ago, that the women's triathlon has been added as a 36th varsity sport at Navy. And by the way, that ties Stanford and Ohio State for the most in Division I. The team will have the same coach who has led the club program for the past 15 seasons. He is a Naval Academy graduate himself, who was a professional triathlete for 5 years, He qualified for the Ironman World Championships twice as an amateur and twice as a professional, and he's competed in endurance races all over the world. So I am very happy to welcome the coach of the women's triathlon team, Billy Edwards, to the podcast. Coach Edwards, it is so great to have you here on Navy Sports Central. I really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time.
Awesome. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's a new varsity sport. Great opportunity to talk to your audience and the alums about this.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get into that because as we spoke about in our before we came on the air here, there's a little bit of similarity between this newest varsity sport at Navy and the one that came on board right before, which was rugby. So looking forward to getting your thoughts on that. But anyway, for those of you in the audience who don't know, Coach Edwards is an Academy grad, class of 2000, right? Is that correct?
2000.
All right, good deal. And you ran cross country and track when you were at the Academy, and I was just curious as to which distances you specialized in, and which ones are your favorites.
Well, I went to Navy to run cross country and track as a walk on. I actually didn't have a full on recruiting visit. I ended up getting an opportunity to be a drag with a bunch of guys that were on the team. It was my intent to run, but I walked on, and when it became time for like indoor outdoor track, I thought I would end up being like a 5K 10K guy because I did a lot of longer stuff in high school, and then I ended up gravitating to the middle distance because there was a lot more opportunity for this walk on to race. Right. So I just made myself a utility guy. And I raced a lot of middle distance just because it gave me a lot more opportunity to race. And I think I enjoyed the 1,000 because it was just a gut race where you had to go fast and you gut it out. I got to develop my speed at a young age, which was probably better than me continuing to do longer distance. And I think I even had fun one year. I paced out a sub 4 minute mile. Like we had 800 or 1,000 folks in Halsey Fieldhouse pushed up onto the track. And,
wow.
It was fun to just like run with people all the way up on lane 3. I wasn't running for myself.
Right.
Comically, it was just awesome trying to bring this guy around in sub 30-second 200s in Halsey Fieldhouse. It was super fun. So I enjoyed being a part of the team and just trying to race as much as I could.
Okay. All right. Good deal. So when did you first become interested in competing in a triathlon? And I was wondering if you could just kind of, from the time you came to making that commitment, say, hey, I want to do this, right up until the time you finished your first one, if you could just kind of walk us through the highlights of that.
Well, I'm a child of the 80s and the ABC Wild World of Sports. And I loved watching like some of those odd things, like Race Across America was on there, which I actually did as a team eventually, and the Ironman Triathlon. And so I was intrigued every fall to watch the replays of the Ironman triathlons. And so I watched that, and was like when I was a child, and I wore like neon shorts when I was like a little kid runner, and I wanted to be Mark Allen and Dave Scott, who are legends of the sport. And then that all got pushed aside because all I wanted to do was run. I wanted to run in high school. I wanted to compete at the highest levels, and I was never great. But I just kept plugging away until 11 seasons into being at the Naval Academy. I was just fried from running. I had burnt out. I was done. I was not ready to run. I couldn't, I was running great workouts, but every time when the gun would go off, I just didn't want to do it. I needed something new. And I started to I bought a bike and I started doing triathlon, and I was not a great swimmer. The first race I came out of the water so far back. I had struggled to take my wetsuit off. I think something happened to my brakes on my bike during the bike leg, and I was on this fancy bike, and I literally had a grandma go by me, and I said, grandma, older woman go by me. And she goes, keep it. And she's like, keep it up. And I'm like, my bike won't go fast. What's wrong? And then I got off the bike and ran like 16 minutes for a 5K, just blazing everybody, but finishing so far back. So my first race was 10 plus years after my first ideas of doing a triathlon, but I was hooked right away just because of it spoke to my things that I wanted to do. It had running in it, so was good at something in it, and I enjoyed the challenge.
Right. Okay. By the way, a quick funny story for you. When I first heard about a triathlon, I believe the very first Ironman, I believe, was in '78, but I had not heard about the event until probably, I'm going to say mid '80s. I think I was still in flight school, and we were like playing basketball or something like that. And I don't even know who it was, but it was a classmate of mine. I remember that clearly. They came up and they said, "Hey, I just saw the craziest thing on Wide World of Sports." And it was like this event called a triathlon where these competitors swim 2.4 miles, then they jump on a bike and ride 112 miles, and then they go run a marathon. And I go, wait, all in the same day? And they goes, yeah. And I said, you are lying to me. Nobody would put themselves through that kind of crazy test, you know? And of course he wasn't. And I ended up going through the channels like a couple of years later, and I happened to flip onto the channel right when they were doing the replay of it. And it was the most dramatic thing I'd ever seen in terms of just how they captured the video and they put the sound to it. And the guy that was narrating it and the athletes, of course, like you'd mentioned, Mark Allen were some of the greatest around. But yeah, and from that point on, I mean, I don't know quite as much anymore, but from that point on, there's a stretch from about like 10 years in a row where, okay, this is about the time the Ironman's supposed to be televised, and I would watch it just because of that. So yeah, pretty wild.
I mean, it was appointment viewing for my friends. When I did the race several weeks later, we would all schedule to have a party, and we would drink beers and have a barbecue and watch it, even though some of us had been at the race. But yeah,
right.
No, it was super fun to watch just because, I mean, and you'd watch till the end and you're like, I'm not crying. No, I'm not crying. No, are you crying? No, I'm not crying. And so you're watching this race because you would watch these people finishing it. And for what's worth, that was intriguing to me. Wow, that is so hard. I want to figure out why. I want to experience that aspect of the sport. It was it's got to be so hard. I just want to finish one. That was my first thing. I just want to finish it.
Right. So to that point, on the subject of mental toughness here, right? I think when you talk about a triathlete, there's got to be just a level of mental toughness that is just so different than some of the other sports. And I was wondering if you could kind of speak to that a little bit in terms of what did you do to develop that? Or is it in fact to a certain level innate in all athletes and then just needs to be developed a little bit?
I mean, it's interesting as a coach and as an athlete. I think there's a bit of it that's innate and some of it's exposure. So I think the innate side is it's probably in you. It's in me. But it's also exposure to opportunities. When I was a young kid, my dad do you want to go run a 5K? And I was 9 years old. My friends weren't running a 5K at 9 years old. And I was sure, go get an opportunity to go hang out with my dad and run, down the line. I went on a bike ride and it was 120 mile ride. I got lost. It ended up turning into a 156 mile ride. But when I got lost and got back on course, it wasn't oh, I'm going to drop out. It was okay, I've just tacked 30 miles onto this ride. So some of it's exposure at a younger age. To that end, I have a lot of athletes that are exposed to different sides of not extreme or longer endurance sports. Ladies are one of my ladies is mountain bike as a kid. Another one of my athletes, her dad does a lot of ultra races. And so they're exposed to this and the fact that they know that, hey, as a human, as a person, I'm meant to move and I can challenge myself and push myself and try to find different limits of physical capability. And then as a coach, when I get to work with these athletes, it's presenting those opportunities. We'll do, at some point during the year, we'll do a 100-mile bike ride. Mm-hmm. Our race distance at the club level was 25 miles. And at the NCAA level, it's 12 and a half miles. And so 100 miles, what's the point of that? It's pushing yourself, mm-hmm. finding those limits. And, at that point you're oh, when I race 12 and a half miles, super fast, I'm not on the bike for 5 or 6 hours. So it's people have been able to push their limits. And so figuring out different ways to push people's limits, presenting a workout, and then tacking on a surprise at the end, stuff like that, having people push and then figure out, oh, now what do I do?
Right. Okay. So we already spoke that you came from a running background, and I was kind of curious when you look at the athletes that end up competing in a triathlon. Is there a pretty good mix from where their heaviest experience is? In other words, are most of them runners? Are most of them cyclists? Are most of them swimmers? Or is it a good mix between all three?
Well, admittedly, it's mostly swimmers and runners. So I think cycling is not being exposed as much. There definitely are, like I said, there are folks that definitely had opportunities to go ride bikes with their parents, or they rode mountain bikes. From time to time, we get athletes that did do some road racing, but most of the athletes that I work with, whether at the club level for the last 15 years or now the team that I currently am working with, a lot of them are coming from, I would say, it's kind of different. With the club athletes, I was bringing on a lot of runners and swimmers, and folks that were just kind of like myself back when I was a mid, burnt out on the sport and needing something new, still having that competitive edge, very high level, if not ability to walk on or be recruited by Navy for cross country or swimming. So it's about 50-50. To that end, though, with regards to the way the varsity level of sport is, the swim is paramount, because the bike is done in a pack and you ride together as opposed to solo. So you need to be able to get out early on the swim. And so now I'm recruiting a lot more, or pulling a lot more swimmers or folks with swimming backgrounds to the program, because it's a lot more necessary. You need to have a deep background in swimming in order to make some of those bike groups, which is kind of sad, because that means I'm not recruiting athletes that I can relate to. So I feel, we brought over 7 athletes from our club program. I kind of saw the writing on the wall. I wouldn't say I got all of those athletes to the club program because of knowing we would go varsity, but it was sort of, starting to see that swimming was becoming more important. But to that end, then I see, like, I have a good athlete that we left on the club program. She swam as a kid, but not to that level. She's just a beast, but hers is on the running. And so she'll probably stay in the club program and be very good as a runner. She'll be able to work harder by herself across the distances, as opposed to needing to come out of the water and be in the packs for the swim like it is in varsity now.
Right. As you were explaining the importance of swimming there just now, I kind of flashed on a quote. It has nothing to do with triathlon, but when I used to watch a lot of golf and the Masters tournament, one of the things they always said was, you can never win the Masters on the first day, but you can lose it. And it sounds like this is kind of where the triathlon is as it relates to swimming, right? I mean, you've got to be able to have a strong swimming foundation just to put yourself in the mix, because if you don't, then you're just basically going to be chasing the pack. Is that fairly accurate?
That's 100% correct. And for what it's worth, and that's where now the varsity level of triathlon is, it definitely requires you to, even more so, you can totally lose the race in the swim. And you would, no kidding, just get left in the groups. The groups, even if it's 3 to 4 athletes, can work together and move up the road. But if you're a minute and a half off the back, over a 10-minute, the swims are it's 750 meter swim. We have athletes that are a minute and a half back. That ends up being 4 to 5 minutes in a 30-minute bike.
Right.
Whereas in a longer distance triathlon, you can make up that time on the run and you don't lose it on the bike, because like in an Ironman or and that's the biggest difference from an Ironman triathlon or other, what we call non-draft triathlons, where you see athletes on bikes where they got their arms out in front of them and they're in the aero position. Those athletes are riding solo, where our athletes are working together on the bike. And so the bike has meaning that reflects what their swimming abilities are.
Right. Okay. So now I want to kind of slowly transition into the triathlon at the Naval Academy. And the first thing I wanted to talk about was how this sport in particular relates to the physical mission. In other words, based on your experience, what is it that connects you to that physical mission of the Naval Academy when you consider the triathlon? In other words, what makes it unique compared to some of the other sports, do you think?
I think it encompasses everything you want in a midshipman, and the fact that morally, mentally, you are challenging yourself. You're exposing athletes to different aspects of sport that require a lot of technique. So there's a mental game to it. It's people have to be in charge of gear. They have to take care of their gear, because if they take care of their gear takes care of them. So I have to teach them that my Marine Corps mentality there.
Right.
But then a part of the physical mission, it's more important than just like becoming a better runner or a better swimmer. And I don't want to running and swimming both have, aspects of obstacles, but in a triathlon, you are out more in the elements and you are exposed to other people and what they are doing. And so it's not just you going down a lane. It is you potentially having someone hitting you in the face with their hand when they're swimming. It is potentially someone clipping you on the bike, and you have to be able to recover on your bike. And the run comes late in the race. And so there's so many more obstacles that I think it's so much more what the military wants out of us as leaders, is not just complete the mission, but overcome obstacles along the way. And so I feel like the mentality is perfect for what we want to see as future naval officers. And so to that end, I feel like I need to recruit the best midshipmen, or like someone who wants that challenge, someone who wants to overcome obstacles, because if they have that mentality, then they're not only going to be a tremendous athlete for me, they're also for our team, but they're also going to be a great naval officer down the line.
All right. Well put. Okay. So you touched on some of the distances for the college triathlon. So let's go into a little bit more detail on those. Just run down the standard distances for me. And the thing I'm most curious about is recognizing, I was kind of taking a look at your schedule, and there is you have your first meet on September 3rd, and then one, I believe, on the following week. But usually there's about, I'm going to say about 2 weeks in between competitions. After we talk about the distances, let's go with the time that you do the the time that you do your last event and that 2-week period to the NCAA regional qualifier. What would that training cycle look like, recognizing that it's a build up to ultimately the championships, which are going to be in November?
Yeah. So I think it's important to understand the distances. You've spoken to the Ironman, and the Ironman being, I think it's just you said the distances, but for our race, it's an hour-long race, which for what it's worth is longer than pretty much any other NCAA sport or individual sport.
Right.
Like, the longest would be the men's 10K. Whether 10K cross country, which is going to look at 28 to 33 minutes, and for women 6K, we're talking 20 to 24 minutes. So it's a long race, even though we call it a sprint distance triathlon.
Right.
So our sprint distance triathlon starts with. So I apologize to all the sprinters out there, but it is a 750-meter swim. But that is by no stretch of the imagination a sprint distance swim. So 750-meter swim, somewhere between 8.5 and 12-minute swim, depending on the athlete. A bike, which is 20 kilometers, or tries to be about 20 kilometers. So it's, could be anywhere between 25 and 34 minutes. I'm giving you the highs and lows of those times. Mm-hmm. And then a 5K run. So everybody's pretty clued in on a 5K run. And our ladies, we're looking to try to get our ladies around 20 minutes. And honestly, some of the better athletes, if an athlete can run sub 20 minutes for 5K off the bike, they're going to be, a top 10 to top 20 athlete there at nationals at the end of the season. So to that end, our schedule is unlike anybody else's schedule. We're a first year school, and I know this, opportunities to race is key.
Right.
So a lot of schools aren't looking for the opportunity to race as much. I want our athletes to race. I want us to become the best racers. My plan is to recruit strong athletes that want to race. And so I want to give our athletes currently and future athletes opportunities to race. That's why they came to school. They want to race. So we have a full season. We have 4 regular season races. Most of our races are that sprint distance race, which is also our regional championships. So we will qualify for starting spots at our regional championships with individual performances at the regular season races. So those will give us starting spots at the regional championship. And we will be using along the way speed work actually with each sport. The time frame between our last regular season race and our championships we'll be done with our base work. We'll be done with our long bike rides. We'll be done with our most of our long runs, even though our championships is in November. But we will start to refine speed. Actually, most of our base work has been done. A lot of our base work has been done over the summer. We'll train through quite a few of our races coming up, and then we'll start to refine and work on technique and work on, making sure we're a refined athlete over the time periods as we get into late October. That's in every sport, whether it's shorter, faster intervals in the swim, and or getting shorter segments on the bike as far as effort, and making sure we're even more refined with regards to like working together on the bike, because quite a few of our ladies are going to come out of the water together, and so they need to be ready to ride together and do turns on the bike together and figure out how to move up the road together fast.
All right, cool. So one of the things I was thinking about is when you break down and analyze your athlete's performance. A while back, I did a feature on one of the sports I'm really into now at Navy is rowing. Right. In fact, I bought a Concept 2 rowing machine about 4 months ago just to replace my 25-year-old life cycle bike. But I actually had the opportunity, and it was a great chance. Almost 2 years ago, I was out in Annapolis for the football game, and I wanted to do a piece on the lightweight rowing team because they'd just come off of the national championship that year. And Coach Bagnall was nice enough to take me out on Saturday morning when they were practicing. And he had he had 3 boats out at the same time, and he'd just be kind of weaving in and out and just checking each rower's technique, and talking to them about the stroke mechanics and all that sort of thing. So it was mostly visual and not a lot of tech. Whereas in football, there is those eyes on the target for technique and everything, but then they got all kinds of stuff to analyze explosiveness and this and that and the other thing. What's your primary method? Is it eyeballs? Or is it stopwatch and heart rate monitor? Is that as simple as it gets, or is there something more to it?
I would definitely say it can get super techy. Mm-hmm. We now have devices where you can measure power output per pedal stroke. And to be honest with you, as a varsity sport now, it's awesome in the fact that we can probably start to expose our athletes to more of that stuff. When you tell somebody to go out, like specifically to the bike, the bike is a machine. Let's just call it what it is. It's a machine. And if I tell an athlete to go out and do a fast bike ride, do 5 by 5 minutes fast. If an athlete finds if I were just look on speed, they could do 5 by 5 minutes going downhill and like, yeah, you went fast, but you probably didn't do anything. So to that end, you need to measure the actual power that you're pushing into the pedal. So the beauty of being a varsity sport now is we can utilize some of those resources and get things like power for the bikes down the line here, but we're actually not doing that yet. Mm-hmm. The beauty and what I've found, especially through the club athletes as well as even individuals that I've worked with. I've worked with a lot of individuals for the last 15 years as well, and what I've found is athletes that get out there and work towards an effort level or work to learn how to push themselves and find out what it is to push themselves at what we would call threshold, or right where your body feels like it's kind of uncomfortable. Those athletes are the ones that we can speak to. And I also try to speak to what threshold is. And we define our effort levels based on a perceived effort scale of 1 to 10. But we also define those things as what they are with what your blood is actually doing. To that end, I do a lot to get them to be exposed to that and understand that and read their body. And then we can start to bring in numbers and be like, okay, all right. I want them to go out there and do tempo runs or effort levels out on the road without a distance for the first couple runs. I want them to I don't want them to look at the clock and see how fast they're going. I mean, we have these Garmin watches now that are they tell us instantaneously how fast we're going. But if I have an athlete that's completely wedded to the numbers right away, they're not going to push themselves. So let's pull the numbers. I prefer to pull the numbers away, especially as we're starting out or as an athlete's in their infancies in any one sport. and then learn how their body feels. Then we'll weave numbers into it and start to go for pace, and try to push to numbers or use numbers as a carrot, not as a strict, this is where you need to be.
All right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'll tell you what, we're going to take a short break. But first, I wanted to let you all know that you can stay totally up to speed on what's going on with Navy sports by joining our group Facebook page and by following this podcast. I'll put a link in the show notes to get you to our Navy Sports Nation group page. And following the show is even easier. All you got to do is tap the follow button, whether you're listening to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, it doesn't matter. This will automatically drop the most recent episode into your library as soon as it's released, and you can listen to it whenever you're ready. It is definitely the easiest way to show your support for Navy Sports Central and the fastest way to grow the Navy Sports Nation community. So go ahead and hit that follow button right now. We'll be right back. All right, thanks for staying with us on Navy Sports Central. Carl Darden here with you, and I'm joined by Billy Edwards from the class of 2000, who coached the Navy triathlon team to 2 national championships at the club level in 2009 and 2018. Now he'll be taking 7 terrific women athletes into competition as an NCAA Division I program. So, Coach, this is actually your 16th year leading the Navy triathlon team, but obviously the first as a varsity program. So I was wondering if you could speak to how different that feels compared to previous years.
It's a dream, honestly. It's I was part of some of the earliest thoughts of going to NCAA. I got to write verbiage that was presented to the NCAA College Women's Committee. I had, Brad Hecker. His name is Brad Hecker. Was a guy who wrote a master's thesis about NCAA triathlon. He's like, "This is something you could do eventually." And I was like, to do triathlon at this level in what we call a daily training environment versus programmed coaching and programmed as in like writing workouts and then seeing an athlete from time to time, which is what I was doing with the club, to now seeing my athletes on a daily basis. And the other day, going out on an easy run with them, which they honestly didn't want me there, but going out there and seeing, and I was, and now, for what's worth, being compensated for my time, but also diving into the weeds with my athletes and like starting to like really spend time with them, and now have the time to like build these athletes into, not to take them to the next level with regards to their abilities. I mean, I think we've always pushed the mental game really well. And I feel like I've done a good job pushing the mental game and making them strong athletes. Whereas now it's fun. It's just a total level of fun to like add more technique and spend a bit more time. Like I can actually spend an extra couple moments, talking to an athlete about like why they're like spoke to another athlete the other day and she had a hamstring issue. And I was like, no, well, this is why we need to be working on strength here and not working on stretch. And this is why. And she was like mind blown, like, okay, all right, this makes sense. And so I can get a lot more buy-in on some of the refined things. So I think we're just going to make just another level of athlete, which is just super fun because they've always been there. And we've taken some of our athletes to that like borderline elite level. We've qualified 8 to 10 athletes over the years to be elite level athletes. We haven't actually utilized them at that level because of the time restrictions, but now we have a little more time. And so hopefully we can take some more of our athletes to that elite level and do even more things at the national and potentially international level down the line. So it's super exciting to just, interact with my athletes a lot more, or have the opportunity to interact with my athletes so much more.
Okay, that actually provides a nice segue into the next question here. So what I'm going to do is, you've got a total of 7 athletes on your team, correct?
Yep, 7 athletes this year.
So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to name them off one by one. And I'd like for you just to kind of throw out one thought that basically, captures what they're all about as a competitor. Okay. So we'll start with Zoe Adama.
This is fun. Self-reflective.
Okay, cool. And what makes you say that?
Oh, you want me to add more to that?
Yeah, just a little bit. I'm just looking for a little context around each observation.
Very, very introspective with regards to how her workouts go and how she races. She's very analytical.
Okay. All right. Very good. Haley Harris.
Beast. She can just smash. She's ready to grind. She's so ready to grind. I almost need to hold her back a little bit. This is my first year working with her. She actually came over from the swim team.
Oh, is that right?
I mean, Haley Harris is a Patriot League Rookie of the Year as a plebe. But like I said, she was a bit burnt out on swimming. She needed a new avenue for competitiveness, and she had started talking to our team as early in her youngster year. And at this point, I'm like, well, now we're going varsity, which, for what it's worth, with your abilities, you can be a freaking tremendous NCAA athlete. So, yeah, no, she's a beast.
Okay, very good. Sarah Jarman.
Tactician. She's a tactician. She's a racer. She's she did junior triathlon, or did triathlon as a high school student, and she knows how to game. She's raced in the top 10 at club nationals with inferior physical abilities to some athletes. She knows how to get herself into the race in all elements: swim, bike, and run. So, yeah, she's a tactician.
All right. Maddie Klippenstein.
Mad dog. She brings the fun. She wants to go fast. Fast is fun, but she brings the fun to the team.
All right. Reagan Quilty, who is your team captain.
I mean, we're not doing this sport this year. Like, Mr. Gladchuck asked me, when do you want to start? And I said, this year. And he was kind of taken aback, like, because we knew we weren't going to start until March. But I was like, no, sir, we're starting this year. Like, I want to start this year. I have Sarah Jarman, who's a tactician and can game. And then I have Reagan Quilty, who is the leader of the team. She is the road captain. She has no problems, speaking up, and she will not interrupt me, but respectfully caveat things I say and put them into her own language. She is the road captain. She is out there. She picked it all up. She also did triathlon as a high school student. I mean, her parents are both grads. Her mom's a freaking tremendous triathlon coach as well. Her brother is a submarine officer and was on the rugby team, actually. But to that end, Reagan's our leader, and she's a leader within the brigade as well. And so to have her and Sarah as firsties, it was like, yeah, no, we do this year because this is how we step up on the right foot. And she's doing all the right things with regards to taking our culture from the club program and bringing it over to varsity.
Yeah. And how important is that, right? I mean, get that culture established early, so then you have something to feed into for, future recruits and so forth. So good job on her. Emily Vela.
Oh, she's my silent assassin, and I don't even think she knows it. She's got a lot of tools. I'm constantly showing her how to use them. And when she figures them out and puts it all together, yeah, she's a little quieter, but she's got a lot of tools, and she's pretty tenacious.
Right. Okay. And Anna Weckluck.
Oh, aggressive, so aggressive. Like, as a club athlete, she was the fastest swimmer in the club program last year in the country. She can freaking motor. So yeah, she's aggressive. I have to hold her back. We have to refine how to make this aggressiveness reflect into her racing across the hour. But yeah, no, aggressive, and she's our only youngster as well.
Oh, is that right?
Which is no problem. It's all good. I appreciate aggressiveness, and we just have to figure out how to direct it properly.
Right. Okay. And that actually kind of leads into the next question. You talked about what stands out about these athletes. And I'm wondering, I don't know if this is just too vague a question, or I'm not even sure how easy it is to answer, but looking at all the different things they bring to the table, how is it that you can leverage them to help make the team better? What are some of your processes around that?
I mean, I feel like I've got like such a great mix of athletes, and they all have such a great attitude. And I mean, to that end, like, as we've pressed on, I felt like it was the right thing to do this year. But as we've moved on, it's just and to have them hanging out together more often. And I want to reiterate the fact that this club program's been going on since the early 90s. So this is not just me.
Mm-hmm.
This is a lot of, for what's worth, it's founded on the mentality of, NSW guys like SEALs. SEALs have been the backbone of our team. When we have more SEALs going, tossing their covers, guys going SEALs, we are awesome. Like when we have more women tossing their covers and pinning on second lieutenant bars in the Marine Corps, we are awesome. Those are our athletes. They're the ones that want the challenge. So what we currently have is just a great mixture of like leaders and followers. Even our second, like our core group is our second class right now, and they're going to be the ones that they have similar abilities, which is great, but they all like come at it from totally different angles with regards to like some of our seniors having done the sport. A couple of like one of our athletes probably I would say, I don't want to call her weakest, but like one of our weaker athletes, like she came to visit as a senior in high school, and one of my team captains was like, who she never got to race with, was like, "Coach, this girl's got to be on the team. She's freaking like she's what we want." And I mean, she knows who she is, and she's exactly what I want in an athlete. So we have a mix of folks that come at it with like different attitudes, like whether they knew they wanted to be a triathlete when they came to the academy, or like Sarah Jarman. She came to run at the academy and realized, collegiate running wasn't for her. And so she went back to triathlon, so we have a huge mix of where people come from, how they compete. And I think to that end, they get along. They have great midshipman beliefs. And I think maybe that's the core of who they are and why they're making each other better right now.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to kind of stay on that track a little bit. And as it relates to recruiting and recognizing, obviously, that this is your first year as a varsity sport, but it's an established sport at the academy. You've got the club program that you can draw from. And obviously, your athletes can act as recruiters themselves when they're, out and about, whether it's within the brigade itself, or maybe they see some people with some promise in their hometowns or whatever. But has the sport got to the point where there are colleges actively recruiting triathletes, or is it still just something that's in a building process?
No, there is high school. There are high school athletes. There is junior triathlon. Is it high school programs? No, it's club programs. Probably club programs, probably more similar to like swimming,
mm-hmm.
in the fact that it does require more time and technique and more details, as opposed to like, running requires more time running, swimming requires more technique. So maybe more similar to like a swimming club. So there are triathlon clubs. I'm trying to establish relationships with some of these clubs. And to that end, I guess, if you're a recruit and you've gotten to the whatever point in this talk, know that like it's not that it hasn't been a priority, but it's been something I definitely am like behind on a little bit. I've definitely been tracking a lot of athletes. So we want to bring on more athletes that have been exposed to triathlon. And I think as a now varsity program, we now have the ability to bring on the athlete that wants to go to, number one, a school with a solidly supported athletic department. And that's what we are. We're a Division I NCAA school. So we have that. We have the ability and we have the desire to compete at the highest level. We have that. And then two more things. We have a tremendous educational opportunity, which I don't want to like say that the other schools that are currently in the sport don't, but we have the highest academic standards out of the current schools out there. And then finally, we present an opportunity for athletes, and some of these high school athletes, some of them really have the desire to make the Olympic team. And there's one or two programs that are out there that they're probably going to give them the opportunity to potentially see more opportunity to maybe be in an Olympic pipeline, which is super, super tight.
Right.
But what we have is an opportunity to be a school that gives you the education and the athletic opportunities, and then have a great, exciting, and a career that reflects your sport.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm looking for those kinds of athletes. I'm looking for some of the athletes that maybe just started, maybe it swam and ran and just got into the sport and are finding successes. And I want to refine those successes with them and bring them about, be a part of our organization, because I think those are the ones. And I mean, for what's worth, I don't feel like we're that much different this year than what we were last year as a club program, because we have been developing those athletes. But I just think now we're going to get the ones that, wanted to compete. They wanted to wear that. They wanted an opportunity to be a varsity level athlete. And so now we have the opportunity to give people, if I look back on myself as a high school student, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to compete at Division I level. I wanted to compete at the highest level. And I almost feel like it's not fair as like it's not fair to my club program, because that club program competes at a very high level and we develop tremendous athletes.
Right.
But now I have the NCAA badge and the NCAA and the varsity backing and in a larger backing from the athletic department. And to that end, we'll also, we have more opportunity now to even expose some young men as well. So, I mean, the club program will continue to develop athletes. If an athlete hasn't done triathlon and they're a good swimmer runner, but maybe they're not great, we could put them into the club program and they can develop. And if they do develop their skills more, we can bring them over to the varsity program. And if they don't, and maybe they're just not, and maybe they're just a great, they're a tenacious athlete that has a challenge, but they just don't have quite the speed on the swim or the run, they can stay in the club program and compete in triathlon at the highest level. Because we've been in the top 5 overall as a club program every year, except for one in my last 15 years. And it still presents an opportunity to be a part of a big school and compete at a very high level. So I hope that explains. But yeah, so we have multiple avenues to compete. So
yeah, and it is very nice to have that kind of flexibility within your program. I think the triathlon event itself is kind of cool because it does allow athletes to compete either at the varsity level now or the club level. And considering that the club level is going against a lot of high level programs anyway, I think that's awesome because when I was at the academy, I was not a varsity guy. I mean, first of all, even if I had the athletic skills, I mean, with me, based on the major I picked, it would have been pretty dicey trying to finish the sport and graduate. So I made a business decision there where I was going to just focus on just the intramural stuff and just, get through the whole academic experience. But I think that those club opportunities are incredible that they have to offer at the triathlon, the sport of triathlon, rugby, any of the other ones there. So hockey is another one. So anyway, so thank you for that. Now, Coach, I do want to spend some time discussing your vision for how you want to grow and expand the triathlon program. But before we do that, I wanted to ask you 2 things. First, what's one of your favorite memories in your 16 years of coaching these athletes?
I think in 2017, we lost the collegiate national championships by a few points due to some weird scoring elements. And CU beat us based on the score, but our team when we raced club, it was in the club environment. They raced 6 of my men finished within the top 16. Four of our ladies raced in the top, 6 of our men finished in the top 14. 4 of our ladies finished in the top 16. And we had what they call a mixed team relay. And these are relays. It's like a male, female. Each person gets to do a single triathlon, a very, very, very short single triathlon. And this is before you only allowed one team. And we had 2 teams out on the road. And we were out there, we put 2 teams out there. And we started out with Brian Primo and Kevin Holder, 2 of our best swimmers. And I actually had athletes that were like, Coach, we're putting together 2 teams. And I'm like, I don't know if that's a good idea. Like, Coach, no, we're going to put together 2 teams. I'm like, okay, fine. All right, I'll support it. Let's do this. And I had my A team and then I had my B team. And my B team was like, no, we're going to beat the A team. I'm like, anyways, they got out there and we were they went through the first leg and they were 1-2. And then they handed off to the ladies and we were still 1-2. And that race actually never finished. But I had my two teams, they were on the second leg of 4, and my two ladies were just going away from the entire pack. And the race was in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and they shut down the race because of a thunderstorm coming in. And it was a good call.
It
was, but the best part about was walking around and just listening to everybody say, "Oh my God, have you seen what Navy's doing to everybody?" And I was just like, and I just stood there. Wherever I went, people were just going like, Navy's killing it. And for what's worth, statistically, I've looked at the numbers. It was the best team to that point. I mean, there's actually been some teams that may have done a little bit better recently, but it was statistically to that point, it was the most dominant, even though we didn't win technically. It was the most dominant team, and it was so awesome to see these athletes. Only having like one athlete who'd ever done triathlon, just taking it to these grad students and professional triathletes in the club environment, and just then having people say, "Wow, look at Navy." And so to that end, I hope we see a bit of that down the line.
Yeah, no doubt. And thanks for that story. I really appreciate you sharing it. That was that was pretty awesome. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about was your experience at your first Ironman Triathlon World Championships. I think that was in 2005. So there's just no way I could let you get away without checking in with you on that. So could you recount that for us? What were your goals going into it? What was your mindset as you were, continuing with your training in the run up to the race? And then I was wondering if you could describe the feeling that you had immediately after crossing the finish line.
It was October 2005. I had done my first Ironman in Tempe, Arizona in April. I had a phenomenal race. I was 18th overall. I was the third amateur. I had smashed it, had a perfectly paced day. Then I ended up doing triathlon for the Marine Corps, doing short course triathlon. I had also run cross country. I was also slated to be on the marathon team, and I was doing a lot. I had just in 2004, I was the top Marine Corps marathoner. So I had all sorts of abilities. And along the way towards my first Kona, I was training. And I think I've talked to my athletes about this recently, and the fact that I had a pizza in front of me and I would eat the whole damn thing right away. And I went for it. I mean, I just trained and trained. I went on a training camp with a Marine, and we did back-to-back 112-mile rides. We did a ride where I think we rode 100 miles with all these, top level pro triathletes. And then I got off the bike and I ran 23, 24 miles, at an ungodly pace. It was a phenomenal training day. And then a week or two later, I I went out and did the hardest, hilliest run around my area. And then and I think the morning of, or I had done a 8K road race in my town and smashed it, crushed everybody and set a 5, and then don't know if I set a 5-mile PR, but I freaking killed it. So all that being said, phenomenal training. Got to Kona, cooked.
Oh man.
So I had probably done my Ironman somewhere in the weeks leading up to that race. And I just wanted it all. And so, I mean, I raced well. I think I was just outside of the top 10 of my age group, which, I think I finished just outside the top 100, which is phenomenal because you have people coming in from all over the world. I was extremely disappointed. I was so disappointed. I look back on it and I'm a little, I wish I'd had someone like myself to tell me what I had done. It's taken me years to figure out, but it was magical at the same time. This adds a whole nother element to it, but I just lost my sister. So that was with me as I was when down the Lee Drive. My parents were there. It was a very emotional experience for me. There was a lot of things that were in my mind. Mm-hmm. And so I think when you end up out there racing for, 9+ hours is what I was doing, you are just absolutely exposed, both physically as well as mentally and emotionally. And I lost it, at the finish line. Just thinking about it right now makes me, I'm holding back a little bit here, trying to be, but yeah, I mean, it was a hugely reflective day.
Mm-hmm.
As an athlete. I was super disappointed as a coach looking back on myself. I had a great year. And I need to look at that. So it was always, Ironman World Championships for me was never a great reflection of my abilities. But at the same time, I didn't fully enjoy the experience. I wish I looked back on some of these World Championships and realized, Billy, as I normally do, William, William, it's the freaking World Championships, dude. Relax. Like you're doing good, man. And so I wish I could go back and self-coach myself a little bit better in that respect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But so, I mean, you went on and compete in the Worlds for several years, right? I mean, let's see, I actually got some results in front of me here. Through 2009, is that correct?
Yeah, I qualified as an amateur my first 2 years, and then to Ironman World Championships. I went into my first year as a pro, my first year out of the Marine Corps, qualified for Kona in my first shot, and then the next year I had a lingering hamstring injury.
Mm-hmm.
Came back the following year with a different coach and a different training mentality.
Right.
Qualified again, and then what's not on there is that I did a couple Ironmans in 2015 and 2016, and I did something I tell people not to do, and I turned down my Kona slots. So I could have gone back and raced age grouper. I could. So I can say that I've actually turned down 2 Kona slots.
Yeah. How many people can say that, right?
I know it's kind of a flex. It's a little bit of a flex.
Right. Now let's talk about what was. I mean, you mentioned your very first one and how well you performed on that one, the Ironman Arizona. Was that your favorite one, or is there another? What's your favorite triathlon venue? Let's look at it that way.
Oh, Madison, Wisconsin.
Okay,
it's phenomenal. It always has the greatest crowds. I did that race after, and adds so many elements to it. I did that 1 year after having done a 1,200 kilometer ride in France 3 weeks before it. And that was, and I did that 1,200 kilometer ride in 49 hours without sleep. And so then I went and did Ironman like 3 or 4 weeks later. I can't remember if I was still working with my very scientific coach, Dr. Phil, who actually worked on the sub 2 marathon project, but he was not pleased with this run up to my Ironman. My Ironman obviously reflected that.
Mm-hmm.
I had ridden my bike so long that I couldn't feel the last 3 fingers on each hand. I hope I'm not putting races together, but at one point, I was getting out onto the bike course and I didn't pay attention to which gearing I was in, and I totally went from big ring to small ring, pushed it hard going into a turn, and literally kicked myself onto the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm yelling, and the volunteers are like, "Who did someone crash you out?" And I was like, "No," I'm yelling at myself for my idiocy. But it was an event that I delivered to myself way too many, or not too many. I delivered to myself more challenges than were potentially necessary. But again, on the day, I was, potentially disappointed, but in retrospect, it was a good performance. And I'm glad I did everything that I did. I went to Ironman Wisconsin multiple times, overcooked. In fact, 1 year I did paste my friend Blake Benke, a fellow Marine, to Leadville.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, I ran 50 miles with him at Leadville, and then raced Ironman Wisconsin several weeks later, knowing full well after I paced my friend that I was like, yeah, I probably ruined my opportunities at the Ironman, but not ruined. I don't want to say ruined, because that's for what's worth. I would never give up. That was even that pacing my friend was one of the for 50 miles of a race was just probably one of the more athletic, one of the more highlights of my athletic life. So anyway, so I would say that like Wisconsin has always been a great race for me to like reflect on what other adventures I have done beyond it. And I also loved the Ironman Wisconsin course because you run through Camp Randall, and the day before the race, when you go down to pick up your pack, if there's a race, you see like the Wisconsin folks like out there barbecuing before their big games and stuff. So it's a lot of elements. So anyways.
Okay, great. Now I wanted to wrap things up by getting back to that question around your vision for the program. Obviously, there's a lot of excitement around this first year competing at the NCAA Division I level. How do you see things growing over the next 3 to 4 years with respect to roster size and the competitive schedule?
So we're small. I wish I had 1 or 2 more right now, but 7 is. But we have the right athletes, so I'm happy with that. So to that end, I would like to get our roster size up to about 10 or 11 next year, and then probably 12. I don't see us ever getting up to 15 unless the opportunities and I think this is the biggest thing I want to say is like opportunities to race. I mean, I definitely want my athletes to come to want to train and have fun training, but I want to give them the opportunity to race. So if I can't give an athlete the opportunity to race in the varsity environment, I want them to be in the club environment. So they'll, if an athlete's like going to be a walk-on, I'm going to be like, you are a good athlete. I need you to be a great athlete. Why don't you go to club and be a great athlete in club and potentially be a great athlete in the varsity sport. So sort of speaking back to your last question, I do want to develop to be about a 10 to 12 at most 15 athlete. To look back on the club program one more time, we do have 23 roster spot on the club program. So we actually are limited on the club program, but yeah, so we're not there right now. So we will try to boost up our club roster spots to get back to it, those numbers, 21 to 23. And then racing wise, we're going to race. I want to my current thought is to race more, race as much as we can, take the opportunities to race and expose our team, to as many races as possible. Maybe down the line, we determine that we don't race, or not every athlete races every race. And maybe they only race 2 to 4 races before the championships, the regional championships and national championships. So maybe that's what it ends up down the line. But along the way, like this first year, like first paramount, develop a culture is what we need to do. Like that's the first thing we need to do is develop a culture. And the best part is we have a culture from the club program. So we're going to, sort of take a lot of what is good about the club culture and bring it over to the varsity team. So developing a culture, learning to become more refined athletes is the other goal. And then another goal is to like just learn to go after excellence as well. So will we achieve excellence? I don't know. We might, but not be afraid to freaking go after it this year. So try to achieve excellence this year. And it feels that may sound a bit weak, but I want to be realistic with regards to what we have. And we haven't seen what our team could do in these varsity races. So I want our athletes to put themselves out there and have some disappointment. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I want it to be okay to not be okay with a race and know that we can grow from it. And because I don't ever want my athletes to, even if we don't win, to consider it a bad year. Like I want our athletes to like, if we're not winning, we're learning. Right. So I want to continue to do that. So, and what can we do with a bad year? What can we learn from that? And whether you're a senior or whether you're a plebe, what can you learn from not winning and take forward, as a midshipman or as a future naval officer?
Yeah, and I don't think you can have a better perspective than that going into this first season competing at the Division I level. All right, so Coach Edwards, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
I appreciate it, Carl. Thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem at all. And it looks like the NCAA championships are going to be right here in Tempe, so we've got to figure out a way to get that covered also.
Awesome. Thanks. You got to talk to my athletes down the line, so I appreciate it.
That sounds good, Coach. Take care. Okay, coming up next, we have our question of the day. This is Carl Darden, and you're listening to Navy Sports Central. All right, thanks for staying with us as we head down the home stretch. It is time for our question of the day. So as always, let's check out the responses to the question from our last show. If you recall, it focused on Navy's 1952 gold medal winning crew known as the Great Eight. And here was the question. Navy's Great Eight crew won the gold medal in the Helsinki Olympics in 1952. How many consecutive races did they win between 1952 and 1954? Was it A, 29, B, 30, C, 31, or D, 32? In looking at the results, the leading vote getter was B, 30, with 84% of you going with that choice. Next was D, 32 races, and 10% of you picked that number. After that was C, 31, with 5% of you going that route. The first option, A, which was 29 races, didn't get any votes at all. It did say 1% there, but I think that was just so the math could work out, because when I pulled up the names, there's nobody listed there. So believe it or not, the correct answer is actually A, 29 consecutive races. And since that time, there have been some pretty awesome crews that come out of those big programs like Washington, Cal, and Princeton, but nobody's even come close to matching the dominance of the Great Eight over that 3-year period. Okay, now let's get to this episode's question. Earlier in the show, I mentioned that Navy women's triathlon coach Billy Edwards is a Naval Academy graduate from the class of 2000. How many other sports at Annapolis have a Navy grad as part of their coaching staff? Is it A, 5, B, 6, C, 8, or D, 9 sports? You all can take some time to think about that one and get back to me with your answers. I'll have the question up on the Navy Sports Nation group Facebook page by the end of the day. One last note before I sign off. The Navy Sports Central Midwatch segment will be making its return next week. We will be following one male and one female student athlete and highlighting their performances as the season goes on. That's going to do it for this edition of Navy Sports Central. Thank you all so much for joining us. Now, if you like what you've heard, please be sure to hit that follow button wherever you get your podcasts. And remember to get the word to all the other Navy fans out there. Once again, I'd like to thank Coach Billy Edwards of the Navy Women's Triathlon team for being with us today. We wish him the very best as he leads his triathletes into their first season as a varsity program beginning this weekend. Our question of the day continues to be a show favorite. You can get in on that by joining the Navy Sports Nation group Facebook page and giving your answer to this week's question. I will pin it to the top so you don't miss it. And just a quick reminder, the views expressed on Navy Sports Central are my own and do not reflect those of the U.S. Naval Academy or Navy Athletics. By the way, the music used in Navy Sports Central comes to you courtesy of Audio Jungle. This is a great site for purchasing the rights to use the music from thousands of artists around the world, and those featured in the podcast will be credited in our show notes. Talk to you soon, everybody. Until next time, this is Carl Darden. Go Navy, beat Army.